Hey there, it is Saturday, so it's movie night, and I'm here with another quarantine quadruple feature for your viewing pleasure. Just finished our 20th week of quarantine. We just finished up July, we're moving into August, our last month of summer. How's your summer been? Probably a little different than your summers usually are, at least for half the country that's being responsible and staying indoors. All of that aside, the summer's a little different than every other summer, and I can't quite put my finger on why. Just feels a bit more peculiar than my usual summers, and I know why. I figured out why. This is actually the first summer of my life that we haven't had a summer blockbuster released in theaters. We're going to be talking about summer blockbusters today. Got a lot of really interesting ground to cover, but first we lost another filmmaker. This week, Alan Parker passed away, director of Pink Floyd, The Wall, Mississippi Burning, Midnight Express, and my favorite of his, Angel Heart. So really great filmmaker. So go watch some of Alan Parker's terrific films and remember him. Also, just a couple days ago, we had a huge earthquake, like pretty big earthquake, maybe not huge, here in LA. I heard varying reports of like 4.5 to 4.8, but it woke me up. I almost fell out of bed. It really scared the shit out of me. It felt like people standing on the side of my bed shaking the bed. It was pretty crazy. It's a weirder summer than usual, and we haven't had any summer blockbusters. Some of the movies we were supposed to have this summer: Candyman, A Quiet Place Part 2, Christopher Nolan's Tenet, which they keep teasing with and being like, we're gonna release it, and it's like, just put it on hold like everything else. Top Gun Maverick. I mean, a lot of potentially big summer blockbusters didn't come out this year. There's not really a steadfast definition for a summer blockbuster. It's basically just a hit film, but we associate certain types of films with summer blockbusters. We typically associate like a big budget special effects extravaganza. A big fun movie is typically what a summer blockbuster is. That doesn't mean it can't be a drama. There have been dramas that have won the summer before. In 90, I think Ghost was the biggest hit of the summer. It could be a comedy. Ghostbusters won the summer in 1984. It can be a horror film. The Omen was the biggest blockbuster of 1976. But typically, they're sort of like fun, more action-oriented films. So 2020 is the first year we haven't had a summer blockbuster in 45 years. Now, maybe you could argue there was something of a blockbuster released on Netflix, The Old Guard, Charlize Theron's new movie. I'm about halfway through it. I'm struggling. I think the idea is pretty ridiculous, but I do think Charlize Theron is the best action star that we have working today. She's phenomenal in Atomic Blonde. But that wasn't really going to be a summer blockbuster regardless, because it's a Netflix movie, so it was going to stream instantly no matter what. So that wasn't going to be released in theaters. That wasn't going to be a typical summer blockbuster. Our first summer blockbuster was way back in 1975. It was Jaws, and I know a lot of people know about all the trials and tribulations of the filming of Jaws, so I'm not going to delve into that too much, but it was a really big movie for Universal. They were spending a lot of money on it. It was a big property. They licensed the novel from Peter Benchley. It was a #1 bestseller. It was originally slated to be a winter release. They thought releasing it in the summer would be sort of the kiss of death for that type of movie, because before 1975, studios didn't release their big films in the summer. And the mindset was that people were getting out of school for the summer, they were going on vacation, they weren't going to spend their time going to the movies. So movies that were released in the summer typically didn't perform as well. But Jaws proved them wrong and essentially changed the entire industry ever since, for better or worse. They're supposed to be released in the winter of '74. But they had so many issues filming out on the open water of Martha's Vineyard, and the mechanical shark kept malfunctioning, said that they had to add over 100 days to the production schedule, pushed the release date all the way back to the summer. They thought it was going to be a disastrous opening, but it wound up being a huge hit. It was the biggest hit ever, made more money than any movie had ever made before that. That's when studios sort of raised their eyebrows a little, and they were like, maybe releasing movies during the summer is not such a bad idea. The highest grossing summer blockbuster the next year was The Omen, directed by Richard Donner. And the year after that was the movie that really solidified the idea of the summer blockbuster. That was Star Wars, of course, by George Lucas. Now, Star Wars and Jaws are really the most pivotal two films in shaping what a summer blockbuster is. That's where the idea of like the big budgets, the big special effects, the big stories that are really being told. And they've merged from like a variety of different types of genres to basically mainly comic book movies or Transformers movies, Fast and Furious. These are the types of franchises that are dominating the summer blockbuster scene now. We don't even really do summer blockbusters anymore. We just do blockbusters all the time. Like, that's what's taking up most of the theatrical windows, are big franchise, multi-million-dollar movies. Every season we're releasing these huge tentpole movies. And what a tentpole movie is essentially like, you know, the pole that keeps a tent up. These are the movies that studios are releasing where they're putting most of their eggs in that basket and hoping they're going to get a lot of money back. It's sort of an unsustainable model of business, and I've been thinking it's on the verge of collapse for a number of years now. And I actually think coronavirus is the thing that's finally going to kill that style of film, at least for a certain amount of time. And I think there's a few reasons for that, which I'll dive into in just a little bit. And I do think a lot of these films are sort of expunging a lot of creativity out of Hollywood, unfortunately, because the movies do follow sort of a basic rubric. I mean, we want certain things when we watch these movies, and when filmmakers stray too far from those certain things, then audiences start to get upset. No, we want it the exact way that we imagined it was going to be, and studios do their hardest to give that to audiences, who in turn say, that is a good movie because you gave me exactly what I was expecting. It's sort of a frustrating place that we're at in Hollywood. I think the way we're going to start making movies again is going to change exponentially. Because when coronavirus happened, there were a few movies that got released on demand. So they didn't necessarily have their full theatrical window. Like The Invisible Man, I think is going to prove to the industry that mid-range thrillers for adults are still a viable source of income as far as movies go. Because Invisible Man was dominating the box office for a few weeks. Then coronavirus happened, theaters shut down, and they released The Invisible Man digitally, and it made a lot of money on a digital release. Blumhouse, they're really smart investors. Jason Blum, he doesn't put as much money into one of these movies as Disney does because they don't have that kind of money to throw around. So they do smaller pictures that are kind of aimed at like an average adult audience. I think that's going to prove to be a model that we're going to go back to. In the 90s, you saw a lot of mid-range thrillers, movies that don't really get made very often anymore. And when they do, they don't have a very big theatrical window because they're pushed out by all of these great big, mega multi-million-dollar films that are getting made. So some of these films that have been postponed, like the newest James Bond movie, these are not movies that are going to get a digital release. That's because the movies are so expensive, they're not going to make their money back just by being released digitally. They need that theatrical window. Plus the amount of money they spend on advertising is sometimes equivalent to the amount of money they spend on the movie to get the word out there, to inundate the airwaves and put billboards all over the place and make sure every trailer you see is going to be for, you know, the newest Marvel movie that costs them millions and millions of dollars. So when coronavirus happened, some of these studios had already sunk so much money into these films that if they released them digitally, there was no way they were going to make a profit. Once the world opens back up and filming starts again, I'm thinking studios may be a little trepidatious to jump into these big, you know, almost $500 million movies. I think they might want to get their toes wet with mid-range movies. So hopefully when we start making movies again, it'll harken back to the good old days of filmmaking. And these movies they're small enough to where the studio doesn't need to interfere a ton. So when you look at these like Star Wars movies or these big Marvel movies or whatever, they're putting so much money into that, they can't have a filmmaker with a wildly different vision as the producers, because then it's not going to be exactly what the studio wants, and they're putting all the money in. So they're trying to hire filmmakers that are sort of easily manipulatable or with a lack of vision to their directing voice. And I know that sounds very harsh, but even when you do bring on a filmmaker that does have an original vision, like Phil Miller and Chris Lord, I think their names were, when they were doing Solo, that Star Wars movie, they were making it kookier and wilder than the studio wanted. So they got fired and they brought on Ron Howard, who does a reliable job on movies, but you never watch a Ron Howard movie and go, whoa, what a crazy filmmaking touch he had on that. He just does like solid, straightforward filmmaking for the most part. And that's what these movies want. So you don't really see a crazy amount of filmmaking creativity in these films, which is kind of sad. And even when there is a filmmaker that I think is a fantastic filmmaker, someone like Ryan Coogler, who did Fruitvale Station and Creed, both of which I loved, when he came on to do Black Panther, though the movie was like a bona fide hit and it made buckets of money, his voice got a little swallowed up in the Disney Marvel machine, I feel. Like, I didn't watch that movie and think that's a Ryan Coogler movie. I thought that's a Marvel movie, and that's what Disney wants. They want it to be Disney is the star. The director's not the stars of these movies. The writers are not the stars. There's like 15 writers on a screenplay, and then like an army of people that aren't even credited on these screenplays. Maybe the only Marvel movies where there's a discernible voice behind the filmmaking are the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, where that's very distinctively James Gunn. And then what happens after Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Disney says that they're firing him before part 3. And they say it's because of some old controversial tweets. A part of me honestly believes it's because James Gunn is the genius behind them, not Disney, not Marvel. It's not blending enough with their universe. And then, of course, there was a big petition to get him back, and they brought him back for part 3. But I think I don't think they wanted to do that, because I think Disney wants their filmmakers very moldable into exactly what the Disney boardroom of filmmakers' vision is. So, you know, hopefully we're going to get back to the good old days of filmmaking where like a director has a vision that they want to get across on screen, because those are the movies that go down in history as the really great movies. So that's kind of what summer blockbusters have turned into. Every studio trying to have their own big interconnected universe, whether it's Jurassic World, whether it's, you know, the Fast and Furious films, Marvel movies. Every studio wants their big universe, and they want their theatrical windows for releasing those movies. So I do think Jaws and Star Wars, as influential as they were on the industry, where that has ultimately like led to has sort of perverted the film industry in my mind, because it is far less about making a great film, and it's certainly more about just making a great big film, a film that's going to just bring in money hand over fist, which all of these superhero movies are. It doesn't matter how bad they are or how much audiences despise them, like Suicide Squad or Justice League or whatever. I mean, they still make like $1 billion. That's what we're going to be looking at today to kind of fill that need of the summer blockbuster hole that's in all of our hearts. We're going to watch 4 of my favorite summer blockbuster films, and we're going to watch the 4 that really encapsulate that summer for me. The first one, as you probably guessed from the shirt, is Spielberg's Jurassic Park. There are other Spielberg movies I certainly could have chosen. Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T. I mean, he's the king of summer blockbusters. Spielberg is. He more or less invented what a summer blockbuster was with Jaws. But Jurassic Park was the most pivotal of my summers. I was all about Jurassic Park when it came out. I guess I was 9 years old. I went and saw it in theaters like 3 times. It was like the most amazing thing I had ever seen. I was weaned on monster movies. I loved monster films. But it seemed like most studios don't really give monsters a fair shot because they're going to be a little more expensive to make. So really taking the time and effort to do a monster movie right isn't something that is usually something a studio takes very seriously. Usually the monster movies you see are like knockoff monster movies made by like a smaller production company just emulating what was a successful movie, like the countless amount of Alien ripoffs that came out after Alien. Steven Spielberg made, I mean, a film that is so perfect you very rarely hear anyone with a disparaging remark. And about the effects, I mean, it's bizarre to think that in 1993 we were hitting like peak digital effects. Now there are some questionable digital effects, like when the Gallimimus herd is flocking through the open field in broad daylight. They look a little digital, but the movie does really great stuff, like putting a majority of the CGI heavy scenes in the dark or in the rain, which makes them look even better. I'm sure it's infinitely more difficult for the animators, but that T-Rex walking through the rain, that looks really, really good. They also use a lot of practical effects in the movies. They had like a 25-foot practical T-Rex that they made, and it looks phenomenal when you see it. That is not something that a studio is going to do today. They're not going to make something that big. They're going to rely solely on CGI. So the bigger and bigger our summer blockbusters have gotten, the more reliant they've become on CGI. So to the point when you have like an entire city floating in the air with 100 superheroes fighting 100 supervillains and all of these crazy explosions and superpowers going on. It's like when you watch that, no part of that feels real in your brain. And we've come to just expect an insane amount of digital effects in our films. But the more spectacular a movie is, the less we even believe that it could be something they created on set. Like, they rely on CGI for the simplest of things. The crazier something is, the more we know, oh, of course that's digital. They're not going to take the time to do that. Now, that wasn't an option back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. You had to create whatever you were seeing on screen. That's why I feel so many of those films are longer lasting, because they had a lot more craftspeople there in pre-production working on it. So pre-production phases for grand epics like Lawrence of Arabia or whatever, right? These movies, they spend a lot of time in pre-production getting everything ready, because they're going to use so many extras, or they're going to use so many sets and matte paintings and all of these cool tricks that filmmaking used to use on modern films. Most of it's filmed in front of a great big green or blue screen, and then they fix it in post. So the amount of time and money they were spending on pre-production, you know, subconsciously it's like, oh, we're saving all that time and money, but really they're spending it on the back end for all of the digital animators that are drastically underpaid for the amount of work they're going to be putting on just sitting in front of a computer creating everything with pixels. And then at the end, sometimes it looks spectacular, you know, but never are we convinced that it's real. And maybe you can suspend your disbelief enough to not be pulled out of the story by the massive amounts of computer-generated imagery that you're seeing. But at no point do you ever think, like, what I'm looking at is real. And that's because we have, like, this little part of our lizard brains that are telling us that there's something just a little bit off about that. It's the uncanny valley, right? So they can get close enough, but they can't quite perfect it. So it's just a little bit off, and we can always tell. No matter how convincing this computer-generated imagery is getting, it's never quite as good as practical effects. So, of course, the best option in modern filmmaking is to combine them, to do as much as you can practically, augment it with computer-generated imagery. That's not the route we usually go, but that is the route that they go with for Jurassic Park. Why Jurassic Park is also a phenomenal film is the characters, the character development that the movie has. So when you take a look at Jurassic World, which is still a fun movie, and it's got, you know, great digital effects and a whole lot of them, and it's a good adventure. You know, it's like solid. I like watching it. It looks really good in 3D. But the reason that movie doesn't really hold up as strongly as something like Jurassic Park, obviously it's like a level of writing, it's a level of directing as well. But a lot of it comes down to character. The characters move the story along, as opposed to just being characters that are thrown into a story. So Jurassic Park, Dennis Nedry feels slighted by his boss, John Hammond, and he agrees to steal these embryos. So he shuts down all of the computers and all of the fences so that he can go steal the embryos. So someone puts the drama into action, and the characters then have to react to that. So every character is making a choice that then leads to the other characters having to respond to those choices. In something like Jurassic World, it's like, you know, shit happens and they're kind of thrown into it. It's like the dinosaur escapes. Nobody really like makes a choice for the dinosaur to escape. Nobody does anything to put that in the situation. It's just the dinosaur outsmarts them and it gets out, and now dinosaurs are out. It's not drama that's driven by the characters. The characters are just there reacting to that drama. In fact, all of the films that I've chosen today have really good characters and conflicts and character-driven drama and are really fantastic stories. with the exception of one, but I actually really like it, and I'll talk about that. So the first one we're going to watch is Jurassic Park. We're watching it in 3D. This was a 3D transfer. So obviously they didn't film Jurassic Park in 3D. They had to transfer it into 3D. So the way that works is, like, normally with 3D, it's two camera lenses right next to each other filming the same thing. So it's like two images layered just slightly on top of each other. The glasses equal out that image and make it look like one. But it gives you the idea that you're seeing a little bit of depth. You're seeing around something. So we have two eyes, and that's why we have depth perception. But if you were blind in one eye, you wouldn't really have depth perception. Everything would be more like a painting or like a movie. So you can't really show depth perception in a movie. You can just give the illusion of it. But with 3D, you can sort of trick the brain into thinking that you're actually seeing depth when you're watching a 3D movie. So the two images are what give it depth. A movie like Jurassic Park, it filmed on traditional film cameras. So they didn't film it in 3D. So they had to do a post-conversion years later. They released this a handful of years ago in theaters in 3D and IMAX, and it was awesome seeing it on screen again. But they had to do a post-conversion process, which, you know, you would argue that's probably not going to look as good. But actually, all of the films that I've seen put into 3D after the fact, like one of the movies we're going to watch today, and The Lion King, Titanic, those movies have all had phenomenal looking 3D when I've seen them in 3D. So our second movie is going to be in 3D as well. Our second movie, I mean, in 1991, this was not the movie of the summer. This was the movie of the year. This movie was like mind-blowing for, I don't know, 7-year-old kid to see this thing. It was quite the experience. It's James Cameron's Terminator 2, perhaps the best sequel ever made. What's great about it is you don't need the Terminator in order to really fall into the story of Terminator 2. And what a story it is. One robot trying to protect a couple people and one trying to kill them. But the one trying to kill them, played by Robert Patrick, is one of the most ominous and spookiest villains ever put on screen. He plays the Liquid T-1000. So he's like a liquid robot. When he gets shot, there's like, you know, like a big bullet hole, and then it forms back in, and he can make his hands into stabbing weapons. He's just such a cool character. And what terrified me was that the Liquid T-1000 is relentless. Once you get in the car and start driving away and you've gotten away from him, he's still chasing you. He doesn't stop. He's just an unrelenting force. And that made the movie so exciting to have this Terminator played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, perfectly played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the role he was born to play, whose seemingly unstoppable killing machine meet his match with this Robert Patrick Liquid T-1000. It's a very exciting movie. When I first saw this as a kid, I mean, the action sequences were mind-blowing. You hadn't really seen something like this. And it's partially movies like this that are to blame for where we're at today, because stunts keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, trying to top the previous film, that they get to a point where they're fucking ridiculous. You can't even enjoy them as, you know, a realistic type, a thing you can get excited by. Like the ninth Fast and Furious film got delayed, but I saw a trailer for that movie, and there's a scene where like a car just drives off a cliff. They're like, don't do it. It's like, I'm gonna do it. And he drives off the cliff, and then like a jet comes down and catches it, and then the car is like safe. It's just like, it's so stupid. No one can watch that and be riveted or excited by that, because you're just watching Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote at that point. It's just totally absurd. These are unrealistic, sure, but they're realistic enough that you can suspend your disbelief enough to enjoy the thrills that happen in a movie like Terminator. And it is some of the best action sequences that I'd ever seen at that point in my life, and this still holds up as a really phenomenal movie. I mean, James Cameron, he makes event movies unlike anyone else. Terminator 2 came out, I mean, that was an event. When Aliens came out, that was an event. And certainly Titanic was like the movie to go see 2, 3, 4 times. I mean, it swept the Academy Awards. And then Avatar. And what's really impressive is that these movies were breaking box office records and holding them for years. So now every movie that comes out makes $1 billion, and it tops the movie that came before it. And it's no longer like an impressive feat, because everyone's going to see every Marvel movie that comes out. And so like, oh wow, it broke a record. Who gives a shit? Like, when Titanic broke the record and held it forever, nothing could top it until James Cameron came and topped it with Avatar. And a lot of people have kind of turned on Avatar over the years. Oh, it's just ripping off Pocahontas. It's a classic white savior story. And like, those things are true, but you can't really deny the impact that movie made and the feat of filmmaking that it is, the technology that it introduced. I know I was kind of bashing on movies that rely solely on digital effects, but Avatar was doing some really special stuff. And everyone can kind of turn on it now if you want, but if you're going to say you're not going to be lined up to see Avatar 2, 3, and 4, you are fooling yourself, because I guarantee once those movies come out, they are going to break records, and they are going to be as monumental of an event as all of his previous films have been. I mean, the guy makes his movies an event more effectively than anyone else. And Terminator is no exception. Just the classic summer blockbuster that I love. All right. Movie number 3. I mean, this was 2008, I think, and the summer was all about Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. I like Christopher Nolan. I'm not a Christopher Nolan fanboy. They can get a little annoying, some of his fan base. I do think most of the issues that his movies do have usually come down to script issues, how women are written, and there's some women writing issues in this one as well. But the script overall for The Dark Knight, I think, is one of the strongest pieces of material that he has had to work with. And I think he wrote it with his brother, Jonathan. But yeah, I do think it is probably Christopher Nolan's best film, and it's hard to deny the entertainment factor of The Dark Knight. This movie, actually all 3 of his Dark Knight movies, I also sort of find responsible for where all of these superhero movies have gone that have just like dominated the pop culture landscape, which I think is, an issue, but I do think his Dark Knight trilogy is very solid, and obviously the crowning achievement in that is The Dark Knight. The characters are really wonderful, and of course there's just that iconic haunting performance by Heath Ledger as Joker. It's really an incredible performance. I mean, he's scary, he's funny, and he's like a really sad character. Of course, it was a tragedy when we lost him, because we lost him so young. He had such a body of work ahead of him, I'm sure, but he did leave behind a couple really phenomenal performances, notably Brokeback Mountain, and the one he won his Academy Award posthumously for, which was The Dark Knight. Only the second time someone has won an Academy Award for a performance after passing away. The first time was Peter Finch for Network. He died, and then he won Best Actor for that film. Dark Knight, I mean, just not a lot that I have to say about that one. Everyone's seen The Dark Knight. It's just a really good kind of crime caper movie with a guy in a bat suit. I love it. Okay, our last movie. So the 3 movies we've talked about so far have all been really strongly scripted films. They've all relied on a great story, brilliantly told. This one, the writing isn't as strong, the characters aren't as strong, but it's such a fun, big spectacle of a movie that I just love it. Everyone had to go see Independence Day. This is an alien invasion movie, and it was advertised and sold basically with like the destruction of the White House blowing up. Roland Emmerich made this movie, and the guy does disaster porn better than almost everyone. He does these big spectacles of famous landmarks getting destroyed by aliens or tidal waves or fires or whatever. These are the movies that he really revels in, and then once in a while he'll try to do like a drama like Stonewall or something, and it's just like, go back to disaster porn, go back to alien movies. So this one stars Bill Pullman as the president. Oh my God, I just remembered on the 4th of July, Trump tweeted this like deep fake, where they put the faces digitally over like a famous character or actor or whatever. Trump tweeted the big inspirational speech, but it's like his face giving Bill Pullman's speech, and then when it cuts to people in the audience, it's like people from his family or from like Trump White House, and oh man, it was really pathetic. But anyway, Independence Day, it's an alien invasion movie. You know, you don't really see the aliens an incredible amount. It's more about the spaceships and the explosions. But it's a kick-ass action movie. It's a lot of fun. You know, honestly, one of my favorite summer blockbusters of all time, really rocked my world when it came out during the summer, was Mad Max Fury Road. And had we not already watched all the Mad Max movies back in like week 4, Mad Max Fury Road would definitely be my 4th choice, because I think that was a phenomenal summer blockbuster. And what's really remarkable about that film is that it came out in the summer and it stayed relevant and topical until the Academy Award nominations, which is almost unheard of for a movie to stay popular that long, especially with very fickle critics who want to be talking about the next big thing that comes out. That's why everything that gets nominated for Academy Awards gets released like a couple weeks before the Academy Awards are announced. And even then, sometimes there's films that haven't even been released that are being nominated for Academy Awards. So Mad Max Fury Road is really something special and one of the greatest summer blockbusters of all time. But we already watched that one during one of our quarantine quadruple features. So we are going to be watching instead one that is also a lot of fun. I really love Independence Day, ID4. I hated that it was called ID4, and I remember that really kicked off the trend of kind of abbreviating the films to like a couple letters and digits. It was kind of a silly trend, but ID4 is the first one I can really register. I mean, T2 did it, but that was cooler than ID4. So those are the 4 movies that we're going to be watching. Very fun summer blockbusters to help get back a little bit of this summer that has been taken from us. The first summer where we don't have any summer blockbusters. It's crazy to think about. I can't always get behind these types of films, but there are certainly ones that I am absolutely smitten with, and we're going to be watching 4 of those tonight. So I hope your summer's going okay. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next week. Thanks.